All right, so welcome everyone. Holding by the Book of Leviticus, chapter 16. Again, I want to welcome everyone. Holding by the Book of Leviticus, chapter 16. We're still in verse 1. Still speaking about the sin of Nadav and Avihu, which we're going to continue and hopefully get to verse 2. So again, want to welcome everyone. And one other thing I wanted to mention says, I spoke last week about telling over stories, right? The importance of being able to tell over stories, how to tell over stories, something that my Rebbe brought up. So I'm going to mention them again. It says, my Rebbe, Arav Agon, Ramosh Ramach, this should be well. It brings down his commentary on Chumash, Tam V'das. It brings down a Medrash. And the Medrash says that what does the Torah tell me? The Torah says God spoke to Moshe saying, after the death, after the death of two sons of Aaron. So it says after the death of two sons of Aaron, when they drew close, right? When they drew too close. So maybe brings down a Medrash. So the Medrash says, why does it say Shnei Bnei Aaron? Why does it say both sons? Now, what would simple explanation be? Because those are the ones who died, right? That'd be simple explanation. You're going to mention the two sons, even though there were four. We mentioned before, Moshe prayed, two of them died, two of them didn't. Right? We mentioned that. But the Medrash here says, very interesting thing. The Medrash says, why does it mention both? Why does it mention both sons over here? Right? It mentions both sons. Says the Medrash to tell you both are equal. Both are equal and deserving of punishment. Because what would I have thought? What would I have thought, says the Medrash? I would have thought each one convinced his friend. Right? Each one convinced his brother. Right? His other brother. Right? In order to sit over here. So what does the Medrash say? No. Medrash comes along and says both sons of Aaron. That their sins were the same. Their sins were equal. It's not like one sin more, right? It could be, that's what we might have thought. That one over here sinned more. And therefore convinced his brother. Right? Comes along the Medrash and says they were both equal. They were both equal over here. And each one was convinced that it was okay to do this, to take this incense, so to speak, bring it in, the Holy of Holies, in order that God should enjoy. Right? They're doing it for the sake of heaven. It wasn't as a rebellion. Right? As we mentioned before, very hard to understand why they would have done such a thing. Because they certainly weren't commanded. We don't do anything that we're not commanded per se. Right? This is pretty severe. Because they went into the Holy of Holies, when they weren't allowed to. But simple explanation is they thought it was an auspicious time. Tremendously auspicious time. So both thought themselves, this is a good time. Neither one convinced the other. They're both on the same page. They didn't have to convince the other. So what do you see? The Medrash says, it says Shnei Bnei Aaron. It says both sons to tell you they're equal in sin. One did not sin more than the other. They both sinned the same. Right? That's what the Medrash says. And then what does it say? What was it going to say afterwards about the death of Nadav and Avihu? Right? What's it going to say? The Torah's going to tell me, talk about Yom Kippur. Right? The Torah's going to talk about Yom Kippur. Right? Because the death of the two sons is close to speaking about Yom Kippur. that what? That was the reason that the punishment is that severe. Right? The reason the punishment's that severe, again, they went into the Holy of Holies. When are you allowed to go in the Holy of Holies? On Yom Kippur. Because that's when God's presence came down on the Jewish people, and they thought it was a good time. This was an auspicious time. Nonetheless, when does the Kohen Gadol go in? He goes in on Yom Kippur. He brings the incense on Yom Kippur in honor of God. And that's what God commanded. That's what the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, is supposed to do. And what happened? Comes along the days where they put up the Mishkan, they took it down, right? They had a 7-day period where they picked it up, they put it down, etc. So during that time, Nadav and Avihu, because they wanted to draw so close to God, this is what they did. Now, on the last day, what was the day? It was Yom Kippur, right? It was Yom Kippur. So they thought, since it was such an auspicious time, that's why they did it. They didn't do it as a merit. They didn't do it as a rebellion against God, right? They had intention to do it for the sake of heaven, no question. So they thought it's such an auspicious time. They're putting up the tabernacle. God's presence is going to come down. What an auspicious time to go into the Holy of Holies. And that's why, what does the Torah here say? That's why the Torah says that they drew close before God and they died. But they weren't allowed to come in that day. That day was a forbidden day. Right? You're not allowed to go in the Holy of Holies whenever you want. Only one day of the year. That's Yom Kippur. But their whole kavanah, their whole intention over here, Rabbi points out, was to draw close to God, to attach themselves so close to Him that what happens? Cause their death. Cause their death. So we've spoken about this, a number of times. Not gonna harp on it. Not gonna harp on it too much. But the point is, the tabernacle is being built. God's presence comes down. They have an epiphany. They have an unbelievable epiphany over here. And they want to draw so close. They want to draw so close that what? That they just lose their minds. They lose their minds, so to speak. Because they want to draw so close. But they weren't commanded. They're not allowed to. But they thought it's such an auspicious time. Could be. God will look the other way because it's such an unbelievable time here. What's the answer? No. Cause their death. So a person may think mistakenly. There are a lot of people out there, misguided, no question about it, but think they're doing the right thing. That they think it's okay. A friend of mine once told me many years ago, in the synagogue, they want to draw more people, to come to synagogue. So they had this whole campaign. And the campaign was called putting Shabbos into Friday night, right? Or really putting Friday night into Shabbos. I think that's the way it went. They wanted to draw people to come. So they got a lot of people. To come. Problem was that even though they had all these people coming, how are they going to do follow-up? What are they going to do with them? Another issue, right? But what did they do? They had a whole shebang. They had a whole, they had a choir, they had music, whatever it takes to bring people in. Now, what's the problem? Obviously, these things are forbidden. Right? Not a choir per se. But if you're using music, obviously on Shabbos, it's forbidden. No matter why you're using it over here, it's forbidden. Not allowed to play music on Shabbos. Right? Not yourself, not to listen to music. Technically speaking, person left their radio on, and it's playing music before Shabbos. Technically, really nothing wrong with it, just not necessarily in the spirit of Shabbos. But okay, but what's the problem? The fact that it's forbidden. So there's a Talmudic dictum The Talmudic dictum is mitzvah ba'aver. What does it mean, mitzvah ba'aver? It means I'm doing a mitzvah, or I think I'm doing a mitzvah, and at the same time I'm transgressing. Right? So it's really not a mitzvah over here. Meaning, person steals somebody's lulav. They steal somebody's lulav. Right? So comes sukkahs, they come to synagogue, stolen lulav. It's not theirs. Doesn't matter, they lift it up, whatever. It's not theirs, it's stolen. So what do? They have all this Kabbalistic intention when they're shaking the lulav. They're shaking the lulav like this and like that, all the intention in the world. God says that's not even a blessing. Blessing in vain. Right? It's being disgusting in God's eyes. Because here you are trying to show you're doing this great mitzvah, but at the same time you're transgressing. So it's not a mitzvah. Totally not a mitzvah. Right? So over here, people come to synagogue. They hear this music. Okay, they're not necessarily the ones playing it. Fine. If they are, it's worse. But they come to synagogue, gonna get all fired up, all this great music, whatever, to be part of prayer. And it's nothing. God looks down and says, it's disgusting to me. Because if you want to tell me it's a mitzvah to pray, that's not the way to do it. I don't care if it brings 1,000 people to synagogue. So what? It's a similar thing. If I take a chair and I build the chair, I only make 3 legs. Chair, table, doesn't matter. What's going to happen? It's going to break. I mean, you can try this at home. Take off a leg of a table or a chair, it'll break. Right? You won't be able to sit on it. Same thing by lies. Lies don't stand. I mean, there are some of the greatest lies of, lies in the world, stood the test of time. Interesting. Right? I don't know if they have a good answer, as to why. Certain lies out there, till Mashiach comes, will stand the test of time. Okay, it's a lie. Right? Talking about Christianity, one of the biggest lies out there. In fact, it's been around for 2,000 years. Right? Been around for 2,000 years, still going. Right? Still going. So normally a lie is never going to stand. Right? People who come out of it, they've seen through the fallacy. They've seen through the fallacy of the church and all that. So that we understand. Right? That's the whole question exactly, why it has that kind of power, for so long. But normally a lie does not stand. And eventually the lie is going to come out. It's going to come out one way or another. Whether it comes out in a better way, a worse way, probably a worse way. Right? It's going to come out in a negative way. But the lie never stands. But when a person lies and they want to, or let's say even better, let's say a person makes money illegally. They make money illegally, let's say they make a lot of money. And what do they want to do? They want to donate it to yeshivas. They want to donate it to, to widows, to orphans, to needy brides. But where's that money come from? Things that are forbidden. So they think they're doing such a great thing, they're giving charity. But where's the money come from? Money's got to be clean. If the money's not clean, you give it to charity, that money, you don't get credit for giving money to charity here because you got it in a legal way. Right? You totally got it in an illegal way. Does it help? Doesn't. Totally doesn't. Not only that, just, I'm on this topic, a person get money in a clean way and give it to garbage also. Give it to bad causes. Give it the causes we should never give to. Right? That are not Torah causes. So if they're not Torah causes, the person going to think, oh, look, I gave charity. Right? But if it's something, where not only is it bad, it's forbidden, you don't get credit. You don't get credit for giving charity. I would say, okay, let's say you gave it to, you gave it to a non-Jewish charity. And let's say it's not a bad charity. Right? Let's just say for argument's sake, it's a good charity. Okay. Do you get credit? Do you get credit for charity? You get some credit. Right? You definitely get some credit. But in the end, look where that money could have gone. So it got wasted. Because we're going to give to our own. We're going to give to Jewish schools. We're going to give to needy orphans. Right? Or widows. or places where it really should go. Now, a person gives to a non-Jewish charity, they will get credit. Seemingly, they'll get some credit for it. But I can't imagine the embarrassment after 120 years where they gave this charity, they could have helped their own. Right? Had a cousin, relative, a lot of money, and they helped raise more than $100 million. More than $100 million to give to a non-Jewish charity. Now, they're going to get credit for that? I'm sure they'll get some credit. They'll get some credit for it. Right? But still, look what they could have done. Look how many yeshivas they could have saved. Girls' schools. Helped out widows, orphans. $100 million, not a small chunk of change. I heard that, and I can only imagine, when this person passed away, and they, different people were speaking about all their charitable things. Some of them they'll get credit for, get some level of credit. But something like this, you got to ask yourself the question: what, they could have given to their own. They didn't. You'll say, well, they give charity. They gave to the United Jewish Appeal, right? They gave to the UJA. They gave to Hadassah, right? Hadassah Hospital. They're going to get credit for that. They get some credit. They'll get some credit, but a lot of that money, totally wasted, right? Wasted for bad things, not good things. I remember, when I had my learning center, I was gonna, see if I could, raise money from one of these organizations. I couldn't even fit myself in any box at all without, having to stick myself in the sewer to try and get money out of them. There was a certain place they gave a year. You're talking about more than 20 years ago. They gave more, about $180,000, $200,000, to some gay, lesbian thing, wherever it was. $200,000. That's where part of the budget went. So, when I saw where money went, and even though I think it's 6% of the money they raise goes to education, I have to understand UJA raises a ton of money, probably more than $500 million a year. Right? Jews' biggest fundraisers in the world. Even though we're 1/1000th of the world's population, we give exponentially more than anybody else, any other group. Just about. So here, 6%, that's not a small chunk of change, right? So $500 million, you have $500 million, right? So 10% is what? Is $50 million. Half of that, right? $25 million. Give or take, a little bit more. 25 will make it easy. $25 million going to some level of Jewish education. You're going to say, $25 million. No, that's not a small thing. True. But what education is going to? Where's it going? Part of that could be going to, planting trees in Israel. So the Arabs can go burn it down. What's that doing for real education? Most of the stuff that they're doing is totally heretical to Torah. So all the money they raise, going in the garbage. Now the question would be, somebody who does that, they're going to get some credit for giving charity. They get some credit. I'm not going to say they're not going to get anything. Other people may disagree. Other people may say that they'll get nothing. Maybe I think they'll get something. If they gave to a Jewish group, they gave to a LGBT, that might be a different issue, right? Or if they gave things that are absolutely heretical, maybe a different issue. That I can imagine going to get credit for. But things that are, I would say, a par or neutral, let's say, in different ways that, I wouldn't say they're good. I wouldn't say they're so bad, in general. So they should get something, some level of credit. But imagine a person helped raise $100 million. And they helped raise this money. And, when they died, they're getting eulogized, for all the charitable work, etc. And, plus this. And imagine with all the money they raised. Imagine what that soul's going to feel like at that moment. I can't even imagine the embarrassment. Said, I could have given the widows, the Jewish widows, the Jewish orphans, help marry off needy brides, different things. That money would go a long way, helping out schools, other things. So what's the explanation here? Why did God give this person so much money if they're going to waste it? They're going to blow it. They're going to give it to things that don't matter or things that are God forbidden. Right? So a person, God can give money and a lot of money to somebody. Why? Because maybe they did a few mitzvahs in their life. So God has to pay them. He has to pay them in this world. So what does that mean? God's going to pay them in this world, meaning they're not going to have anything in the next world. God's going to wipe them out in the next world. Right? So if they have, a lot of money, a lot of property, this, that, and they can help others, they choose not to. Money's also a test. So they can choose not to give, true? Or give to the wrong thing. Right? So I'm not privy to why some people, filthy rich, some people struggle, this, that, but it's a merit to be able to give to the right causes. And if you don't give to the right cause, that money going to be slapped upside your head in the next world in a negative way. In a totally negative way. God said, look, I gave you an opportunity. Forget you didn't give. There are people out there that won't give. They just keep the money in their pocket. And they'll buy extravagant things. They're going to give to others. Why? I worked hard for it. I inherited it, worked hard for it, whatever. So tell them to work harder. Try new business tactics. I should help them. Why should I help them? Right? That's the mentality. But Jews are characterized by three things. They're Rachmanim, Baishanim, and they are Gimul Chasad. They have compassion for others, Rachmanim, Rachamim, they have compassion. They're Baishanim, they get embarrassed easily. And the third is Gimul Chasad, they do great acts of loving kindness. Whether it's giving charity, you go to any Orthodox community, and you see they have free loan society. They, people didn't have Shabbos candles before Shabbos. People lend those out. They have, medicine, all kinds of things they lend out for free. That okay, you have to return it, whatever. You didn't buy challah for Shabbos, you forgot, it's right before Shabbos. There are people that have a thing set up for that. All kinds of things. In every community, every Jewish community. You won't see it non-Jewish communities. That thing doesn't exist by them. Doesn't exist by them, exists by us. Why? Because we're there to help. We're here to help others. That's what we're here for. It's part of our psyche. It's part of our DNA. But you can have Jews that don't want to help. They don't want to give. And taking money out of their pocket is like, splitting of the sea. How can that be? It's part of our DNA. So how can it be a person may not do that? Because if they're not connected to Torah, they're not connected to mitzvahs, so then they're like everybody else. So they're like non-Jews. That's what they're like. They lose those character traits. Now, it doesn't mean they disintegrate. Doesn't mean a person can't repent or whatever. Right? It definitely can happen. But I'm saying that's part of our psyche. That's part of our DNA. The UJA, the United Jewish Appeal, or the UJF, the United Jewish Federation, they're secular Jews. They're secular Jews, but still, they have this idea of giving. Giving charity, quote unquote, tikkun olam, fix up the world, even though their definition's kind of skewed. But we're not going to go there. The point is that even by secular Jews, they have an understanding of giving. How? How do they have an understanding of giving? Because it's part of them. That's what makes them up. That's part of their DNA. And whenever it's part of someone's DNA, whether you give more, you give less, they understand to a certain extent that that's their obligation. Now, you got plenty of Jews out there. They're not helping Jewish organizations. They're not giving to charity, or they're giving much less or whatever. I'm not talking about because it's Corona or not Corona, this and that. They have money. Not a question of money. They feel, why should I give? Or they'll give to the wrong thing. Right? But you would think at least it's okay. Let them give. That's hard enough. To take money out of your pocket, money you earned, to give. Right? To give 10% or more, whatever it is. Right? So it's a huge thing. an unbelievably huge thing to be able to give. You also, you also have to know how to give. You have to know how to give. And if a person doesn't know how to give, then okay, that's their loss. There are people who spend their money extravagantly. My Rebbe said many times, you don't lose out by giving. You don't lose out. Some people think he had somebody built, in South Africa, built an extravagant home. And my Rebbe was telling him, about, the importance of putting up mezuzahs, and all that. It's okay. The person put up mezuzahs, but he says, you know what? I'm not going to put up expensive mezuzahs. I'm only going to put up relatively cheap mezuzahs. Now, it's a little bit hard to fathom. He just spent a fortune building his house, right? So now let's say he's got 20 rooms. Then he has to put up mezuzahs. Not a small amount of money here. But why are you going to skimp on mitzvahs? If you spent so much money building up the house and decorating it and making it fancy and this and that, you want to tell me you don't have money for mezuzahs? You don't have money for quality mezuzahs? You're going to take, kosher mezuzahs, not better mezuzahs than that? You can afford better mezuzahs. Mezuzahs protect the house. They protect the person's house. Right? So if that's the case, why would you skimp? Why would you skimp? Because your priorities are out of whack. Because you're too busy decorating your house. That's what you're too busy doing. So by decorating, spending a fortune, what? These other mitzvahs aren't worth anything. You're going to get the cheapest matzah, you're going to get the cheapest esrog, and you get a $75,000 car. Come on. Doesn't add up. But it does add up. Why? Because a person, in order to do mitzvahs, in order to do them right, you have to have a merit. You have to have perseverance. You have to have self-sacrifice. You have to know what you're doing. It's not just about doing the minimal. Now, should a person who has no money or barely makes ends meet, should they be spending $300 on an esrog? No. Why not? Because even though they're going to get it back, they'll be able to get the money back because whatever we spend on festivals and on Shabbos, we get the money back. So you say, what are you afraid of? I can test God in this way. But see, why are you doing it? I understand the mentality. You want to have a beautiful esrog. There are no blemishes. There are no dots. There's nothing. It's beautiful, right? It's very clean. But a person has to spend within their means. They're not allowed to spend money that they don't have, in this case. Now, even if a person is not doing well at all, you still have to have an esrog. You still have to have a lulav, right? Obviously, if you're a guy. For a woman, good for her to shake. Doesn't necessarily mean she has to own it herself. It's a good thing if she's by herself to have her own, but she can fulfill her obligation shaking someone else. She doesn't necessarily have to buy her own. A guy has to, right? A guy has to. He has no choice. So you're going to say, so what happens if he doesn't have as much money? So buy a cheaper one. I know somebody, I don't have the guts to do this. I know someone, doesn't have so much money. And he waits till the last day of Sukkot to buy his lulav, buy his esrog, and everything else. I don't know, and he told me every year he normally gets good stuff. He normally gets good quality stuff. Usually, people buy at the very beginning or before, right? In order, or certainly before the holiday, right? Question how far before, whatever the case is, they want to make sure that they're getting good quality stuff. So they gotta go early. You're not worried. God will take care of them. And the closer it gets to the holiday, the cheaper the prices become. Right? So he knows he's got the upper hand. So he looks around and finds quality stuff and he pays a third of the price. Maybe even half price. Okay. I don't have the stomach for that. I don't have enough faith in myself that I'm going to pick up something good like the last day. Forget other people in my family. That's what I'd have to get for. right? I only have one person I really have to get for. It's my younger son, but he's not obligated in the mitzvahs now. Right? He's still got a couple years before his bar mitzvah still, right? You should get one that's kosher, whatever. So as only one, right? Really two I have to get, but one that has to be, should definitely be kosher, should be very kosher, etc. So, when it comes to Passover, right? Purim's coming up in a couple weeks. Passover 2 weeks after Purim, right? Or a month after Purim. So, Passover, everything when it comes to food, that's really most of the holiday, is matzah and, potatoes and more potatoes and many things you can do with the potato, right? Etc. So things are double, triple the price. So that's why someone wants to convert. Yeah, there's a old Talmudic dictum. It's called mitzvahs cost geld, right? Mitzvahs cost money. Passover, you like it, you don't like it, 3 times the price. Most things are 3 times the price when it comes to food, right? It's extra supervision, etc. So it costs you a lot more. It's going to cost you a lot more. Now, what are you going to do? If a person's tight for money, you're not going to keep Passover. You keep Passover. Okay, you might not buy this, you might not buy that. You have to eat matzah. Certainly the first 2 days outside of Israel, first day in Israel, right? Not to mention Shabbos. You have to have matzah. In the intermediate days, you don't have to eat matzah. Shabbos, you have to eat matzah. Right? The last day of the festival, you have to eat matzah. In between, you don't have to. Right? And some people eat less matzah during that time because it just affects them in a negative way. Right? Matzah can do that. At the same time, Rav Elijah the Vilna Gaon said, every bite of matzah you take, even during the intermediate days, you fulfill a Torah commandment of eating matzah. Right? But a person can say, come on, I'll eat it when I have to. If I eat it during the week, and a little bit rough on the system. Could very well be. Now, at the same time, matzah is not cheap in general. So, person got to figure out, you got to put money aside. What people do. If they have money to put aside, they put money aside for Passover. Passover is expensive. Right? There's no question. There's no way around it. You eat matzah and vegetables, okay? Still, other things when it comes to, let's say sugar or butter or any, other things that are processed, not going to be cheap, right? Food's going through the roof anyway. Price is going through the roof as it is now, right? Passover, you can only imagine. So what's someone going to say? Well, not going to keep Passover? You got to keep Passover. That's why a Jewish community wants to see that someone who wants to convert can afford to live in a Jewish community. And that's also simple. And if you have kids and other things, not so simple. Right? But it doesn't mean I have to be living the luxury. It doesn't mean I have to make X amount of money. Now, for some people, I've heard they were told, you want to come to this community, you got, a few kids, you got to send them to school, you need X amount of money. If you don't have X amount of money. Right? Some people get scholarships, other things, they can get helped out. Right? Community can help out, certainly as well. But that's one thing they want to see. They want to see a person knows what they're doing, that they're serious, and they're self-supporting. Now, I got in trouble for saying this a while ago, because, someone, like someone said, like, why would you say that? I say that for one very simple reason. Because we're not looking for freeloaders over here. Jewish community, we have enough people to support ourselves. If someone comes in, and I've heard this a number of times, I'm on a fixed income, and I can't work, and the Jewish community owes me to help me. Where's that written? Where is that written? Where in the world is that written? I don't know where that's written, but I got hammered. I got hammered. I got hammered for such a thing, for saying such a thing. They say God's going to judge us, God's going to judge us, and blah, 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 blah. I said, if you can move, you show that you're serious. Okay, Jewish community can help. We can help pitch in. But why is that our obligation to bring people in? We're not looking to do that. We got our own issues. We got plenty of our own issues. I'm not saying people won't get helped. But see, if people find out, say, oh, look at all the good things the Jewish community did. They moved me. They did this. They did that. Everyone's going to want to join over here. And not for the sake of heaven, no question. So a person has to, again, it doesn't mean the person needs all kinds of money. That's not what they're looking for. That's not what the community is looking for. They want to make sure someone can hold their own or self-sufficient. Now, does that mean if they have issues and they have problems, they're not going to get help? Doesn't mean that. Right? Definitely doesn't mean that. But they want to see, who's coming in. And, are they going to be a burden to us? Are they, et cetera? Right? Again, does that mean I have to have X amount in the bank? No, it doesn't mean that. But, come Sukkot, you got to be able to sit in the Sukkot. And it's a little bit easier because you can make a sukkah out of anything, right? Pretty much anything. Okay, your 4 species going to cost you. It doesn't have to go through the roof either. But, it's going to cost. So when a person's tight for money, what's one of the first things they skimp on? Mitzvahs. I remember I had a story, somebody, a wealthy person, and he went to him for a certain cause. And he said, well, I used to make X amount a month. Ton of money. He said, now I'm not making as much. So I can't give. The Rebbe said, I don't understand. He said, you think that's how much you're supposed to make. Right? But God just gave it to you in advance. He just gave you a certain amount in advance. So once he gave you that amount in advance, so you go according to that. Not to say, oh, this is how much money I made. And so that's how much I can give or I can't give. He gave it to you before. He gave it to you, chunks at a time before. So now all of a sudden, less money's coming in. You're going to say, I can't give. What about the money you got before? Right? So let's say, we'll say like this. Let's say for 6 months, this person was making, was making more. I think the case was, he was making more than $25,000 a month. Right? So, it's like $300,000 a year, give or take. Right? So now 6 months, he's making, let's say $22,000 a month. Now, the next 6 months, he's making half that. Or he's making a quarter of that. But he got 6 months up front here. So if he got the money up front, what do you mean he can't give? So you give accordingly. But that doesn't mean you don't give it all. Right? Not only that, it's another thing. If a person is in the red every month, technically you're exempt from giving charity. In other words, you don't make ends meet. You're not making ends meet. So if you're not making ends meet, you're exempt from giving charity. But the reality is, some people will say, you should give anyway, because you never lose. You never lose. Right? I'll tell you a story. A friend of mine told me. A friend of mine told me this last week. I was at a wedding. A friend of mine I've known for 30 years. More than 30 years. 35 years. And he told me the following story. He's a scribe. He writes mezuzahs. He doesn't really write mezuzahs anymore. He really writes tefillin, parchment for tefillin, whatever. So when he was first married, he was struggling a lot. His writing wasn't so good. Whatever. He was struggling a lot. So he gets a call from a rabbi in his yeshiva. It's late one night. And he says, I got a person here who needs mezuzahs. So he says, well, can it wait? He said, no, he's here now. He said he's here now. And he said, come right now. You have to come right now. Otherwise you're going to miss the golden opportunity. And he's like, I don't have money. He said, there are no buses now, to go. So he said, take a cab. He says, I don't have money for a cab. He goes, borrow money. So what do you mean borrow? He said, borrow money. So what? So before that, so let me preface the story. Before that, they went to Rav Steinberg. They went to Rav Steinberg of blessed memory, one of the Torah giants of the last generation. And asked him what to do. struggling financially, struggling in a major way. What should I do over here? Barely have money for food, barely surviving. So Scheinberg told him, he said, I want you to give Chomesh, tzedakah. What's Chomesh? 20%. I want you to give 20% to charity, 20% of everything you make. I want you to give to charity. So this friend of mine said, did the Rav hear what I just said? He said, I don't have any money. I'm losing money. He was losing money that even the ones that mezuzahs he was able to sell, he's still losing money because of the parchment. He says maybe the Rav didn't understand, the Rosh Yeshiva didn't understand what I meant. He says, I understood what you meant, and that's what he told him to do. He told him to give 20% to charity. So he gets home to his wife. He tells his wife the story. And his wife burst out laughing. So his brother was like, what are you laughing about? He says, not a problem. We don't have anything. So giving 20% of nothing is still nothing. Right? That's what she said. 20% of nothing is nothing. Right? So what happened? Shortly now, Rav Steinberg said, if you do that, you won't have any problems. You won't have any problems with making a living. He said, but yeah, you have to do it. That's what he told him to do. So shortly thereafter, he told me within 48 hours of what Rav Steinberg told him to do, he gets a phone call. So this Rav in his yeshiva tells him, I got someone who's interested in buying mezuzahs. You should come down right away. He says, there are no buses. It's very late. There are no buses. So he told him to take a cab, take a taxi. So he said, but I don't have money for a taxi. So he said, borrow. He says, go borrow money. He's like, are you serious? He goes, I'm telling you, you don't want to miss this opportunity. Come down right now. So what did he do? He borrowed money from a neighbor. He went down there. Person that he met was a big dealer in mezuzahs, and he bought everything he had. He bought every last mezuzah that he had, and for more than 8 years, got his stuff out there till he got a much bigger name and all that. Within 48 hours, 48 hours has happened. So he said, not only that, he told me, he said, ever since then, he said, I've been giving 20%, of everything I make. I never have a mezuzah in my drawer. But I never have a mezuzah in my drawer. I don't have a problem selling. So I asked him, I was just curious. He's been doing this for a long time. He's got a good name. He's got a very good name. Mezuzahs and tefillin. So I asked him, I said, well, how much do you charge? For mezuzahs. I was just curious. So he said each mezuzah is $250. So in shekels, that's like 770 shekels. I mean, it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money for one mezuzah. Imagine you had to put up 10 mezuzahs. That's like, it's like 7,800 shekels. It's like it's $3,500. To put 10 mezuzahs in your house. So he's already got a name, doing relatively well, with that, etc. But he said, I gave 20%, and I've never had a mezuzah in my house. Meaning I've never had parchment left in my house that hasn't been sold. It's always gone. I never have anything in my pocket. I never have any mezuzahs lying around. So I asked him, I said, by the way, I said, my son's going to be bar mitzvah in, I got another 2.5 years. So I said, when do I have to put my, my hat in over here for for tefillin? He said, 6 months. 6 months before is fine. So I got the, what they call protection. I got connections over here. So they told me 6 months. But that he told me that story last week. And it's just like, it's a funny story in a certain way. And he's like, how am I supposed to get there? I don't have money for a taxi. That's, he didn't have money. He never, wasn't making any money. He was losing money by writing. That's what he was doing. He's asking, should I do something else? Should this, whatever. And Rav Steinberg told him, give 20%. 20%. So his wife laughed, 20% of nothing. Right? But he said, since then, happened within 48 hours. This guy came to the yeshiva where he's learning, and he bought his whole stock. He bought every last mezuzah that he had. Every last mezuzah, and he said, I've never been wanting to have problems selling my mezuzah. Never had a problem. He said, I never have any mezuzahs in my house. If someone needs an extra mezuzah, I don't have any. I don't have any. Pretty remarkable story. Pretty remarkable story. Told me this last week. Now, so there's a segula. Segula meaning that, you can test God on this. Person's really holding there, and that's what they're going to do. That's what we're going to take on. Right? You won't have problems. Right? That's what he told them to do. And I'm not sure everyone will give that advice. I'm not sure, every rabbi's going to give, such advice. But the point is, you don't lose by giving charity. You never lose. Not only that, if you spend more on, Shabbos food, festival food, etc., you get that back. Right? That the Gemara says clear, you get back. And money used to educate your kids. That money you get back. Right? Giving charity, you don't lose. You have to give to the right places. If you give to the wrong place, as we mentioned before, someone raises money, a Jew raises $100 million for a non-Jewish charity. They're going to get credit? Maybe they'll get some credit. But I guarantee the embarrassment will kill them 10 times over. I could have given the Jewish things, proper Jewish things, but I didn't really believe in it. I thought it was all make-believe. I thought it was this. I thought it was that. Imagine the embarrassment at their own funeral. And the soul was there. The soul hears. The soul hears what's going on. The soul at that time goes to places that it knows, goes to its own house, wherever. But the soul was there. Like, the soul's like jumping up and down, screaming, you're killing me more. They're getting all this praise. It's all sheker. It's all a lie. It's true. They raised the money. That might be true. It could be some of their own money, whatever it was, doesn't matter. But they raised an exorbitant amount of money, an unbelievable amount of money, that they flushed it. They got misused over here. It went to a non-Jewish charity. Look where it could have gone. They're going to say, come on, Jews think about themselves. Everybody thinks about themselves. Right? We're going to support our own. That's for sure. We come first. So imagine where that money could have gone. Even if it had been a smaller amount, half that amount, a quarter of that amount, and that's where they put the money. Can't imagine the embarrassment. You have to have a merit to know where to send it. You have to have a merit. And you get tremendous credit. Tremendous credit. Helping rabbinic scholars, helping needy brides, helping, schools, girls' schools, boys' schools, widows, orphans, plenty of good causes. Plenty of good causes out there. They have to give to a non-Jewish charity. $100 million wasted. So God gave a golden opportunity. They blew it. And it's going to be used against them forever. It's going to be used against them because they could have given it to the right thing and they didn't. Now, I heard that story. The relative of mine told me the story. Heard that story a number of years ago. And I said, how much? I didn't think I heard well. I was like, how much? And they said, yeah, went to this organization. I said, are you serious? I mean, they said, yeah, that's where they did it. And they helped raise all this money. And this person was like saying what a great thing it was. I just kept my mouth shut because I knew they weren't going to listen anyway. And I thought to myself, you got to be kidding. You got to be kidding. That type of money, that's where it went. So I get mileage out of the story. Get a lot of mileage out of the story. I tell it over a lot. It's mind-boggling. Mind-boggling. When I had my own money, I started my own institution, whatever, came out of my pocket. I got all the merit for it. Do I regret it? No. Not at all. That merit's mine. You got to know where to give it. You have to know where to give it. And if a person gives it to the wrong place, they're going to pay. They're going to pay a serious price. Not to mention the embarrassment where it could have gone. Where it could have gone. A lot of good causes. Tremendous good causes. You know, imagine someone left it to like save the whales or, you know, some game reservation or something. God have mercy on all of us. There are a lot of things we need to learn how to do, right? One of them is if we have money, where to give it. That's what we have to learn how to do. You know, it doesn't matter how much, right? But it has to go to the right place. And if it doesn't go to the right place, you might get some level of credit. You might get zero credit. You're going to say, that's what you gave it to? Yeah, because that's what I believe in. That's what I believed in. Now they see absolute truth. Like, I can only imagine, you know, you see these like dollar bills, euros, whatever, you know, in the next world slapping them. I don't know how you slap a pure soul, but they're getting slapped all over the place for just going against Kaufman's 614th commandment of don't be stupid. And that's what they did. You got to say you can't blame them. What do you mean you can't blame them? They're blamed. They are to blame here. They could have given. They absolutely could have given the proper causes. They didn't. But they didn't really know. Doesn't matter. That's where the money went. Doesn't matter what they knew, what they didn't know. I don't care if they grew up as a potato farmer in Idaho. No offense. Anyone's a potato farmer grew up in Idaho or in the prairies or wherever. Right? If a person's Jewish, they should give to their own for proper causes. They don't give it to some bozo type of thing over here. Even if it's a charity, okay. Better than give it to other things, maybe. Right? But they had a golden opportunity. They blew it. They absolutely blew it over here. Right? It's mind-boggling. So what's the answer? The answer is God gives people certain merits. We're given certain merits. If we choose to use our, what we have in the right way, very good. If you don't use it the right way, it's going to come back to bite you. Unless you repent. It's going to come back to bite you. Say, but I didn't know, whatever. Now you know. Now people know. So in the future, regardless of what they did in the past, they should help out those that need to be helped properly in the Jewish community. That's what should be done. Plenty of good causes out there. Yeah, take questions. I see there are questions here. Someone asked, can you just buy matzah when it's really cheap and keep it year-round? No reason not to keep it year-round. If you want it year-round, but if you're a Jew, you got to eat it on Passover. Right? The whole purpose is eating it on Passover. Eating it year-round doesn't help if it's, if you don't eat it on Passover. Now, one thing you have to keep in mind as well, you got to be careful when you check out, if a person's going to buy matzah, you have to make sure the matzah does not say for all year-round usage. Meaning it's chametz. How do I know it's chametz? In the package, it'll say, don't use on Passover. Someone bought, a family member bought matzah. And it said don't use for Passover usage. Don't use for Passover. They said, how come? It's matzah. I said, what exactly is matzah? It's water, flour. And it can't, the whole process from beginning to end, come out of the oven has to be 18 minutes. 18 minutes and 1 second, that's chametz already. Rabbis tell us it's already chametz. So you can't use it as matzah for Passover. Looks like matzah, smells like matzah. So what? Can't use it for Passover. Finished. Right? The first time, yeah, matzah's matzah. I said, okay, but it's not. Right? Now again, so the question is, someone wants to use it all year round, fine. But a Jew has to eat matzah on Passover. And if you can't digest wheat, there's oat matzah. It costs you a pretty penny. And it melts in your hand, not in your mouth. Right? It's like mush. Right? Totally like mush. But okay, a person has a problem with gluten or whatever the case is. They have to eat, they can't eat wheat. So let's say they eat spelt. Could eat spelt, could eat oats. Oat matzah, costs a little bit more. But you have to eat matzah. Jews have to eat matzah on Passover. Non-Jew, who says you have to eat matzah at all? Can you eat? Now, what happens if you have leftover matzah after Passover? So use it all year round. You can use it with all your dishes. You don't have to use it just on Passover dishes. Use it all year round. right? You can definitely keep it all year round, not a problem. But you have to, but a Jew has to eat on Passover. That was the point. Somebody asks, is a limit how far a person can walk, right? If you don't have an Eruv, right? So what's the whole thing, right? What's the whole thing with that, right? So, so normally we say that obviously there's certain things I can't do, right? Certain things I can't do on Shabbos, right? Can't drive, obviously, shouldn't bike, unless it gets broken, you're gonna fix it. Blading, skateboarding, other things, that's gonna be forbidden, right? What am I allowed to do? I'm allowed to walk. So what's the maximum walking range from one city? Is 2,000 cubits, 2,000 almost. An amma is a arm's length from the elbow to the arm, from the arm to the elbow, right? Arm's length, which is about 3,000. It's about 3,000 feet, give or take. Right, it's about half a mile, maybe, or 960 meters. Right now, we're talking about, where does it start from? It starts from the city limits. Right, so that means a person shouldn't be allowed to walk a certain amount in any direction outside your city limits. Right? Again, we're talking about 3,000 feet, give or take. Now, what is considered, what's the $1.5 million question here? What's considered city limits? So city limits, are not defined by your GPS. Or your map. I don't think people have maps anymore. But if you had a map, let's say in your glove compartment, and you're not defined by that. So if there's more than, let's say, 70 arm lengths between one house and the next, which is probably not, right? It's probably much closer. Then all contingent housing is part of the same city. So therefore, be permitted to walk even from one city to the next because it's all connected, right? In many ways. And certainly, if a person's taking a long, if a person's taking a long walk on Shabbos, or they have to walk very far, to get to synagogue, right? If they have to get very far, then, there's going to be an issue over here, right? It's going to be an issue over here. So the question is that, how can it be that there's an issue if I'm walking 2 kilometers, 3 kilometers, right? More, right? So we said before, right? You get about 3,000 feet if you don't have houses connected and all that in one direction, right? So normally, where do we consider where a person's starting from their house? Usually, right? Doesn't have to be the case, but usually a person's house. So the reality is, though, I can make that area wherever I want. Doesn't necessarily have to be my house, right? In other words, let's say a person wanted to make their place where they're going to dwell, right? Somewhere in between where they are in the synagogue, right? So let's say it's going to be, 2 kilometers, 2.5 kilometers to walk, to synagogue. It's going to be further away, right? You're much further away. So if you put where your starting point from, not necessarily from your house, from somewhere in between, then I don't have a problem. Right? Then I don't have a problem. Now, the question is, how do I do that? What do I do? Just say, okay, I'm in the middle of the city, right? I can say, okay, this is where I'm making my place I'm going to stay. But I don't have a house there, so what do I do? I mean, it's complicated over here. Right? I'm just giving you the relatively simple explanation. So if a person spends a certain amount of time in the city, again, we're talking without an Eruv, right? Without the ability to be able to carry, etc. Now, the entire city is considered where they're living. You're 5 miles away from the synagogue, or 3 miles. It should be really within 3 miles, let's say, right? Within the synagogue. Where does the 2,000 amos, the 2,000 cubits? I don't even know what a cubit is, right? It's like 3,000 feet. Let's say, where does it start? So seemingly it starts at the edge of the city. Now, cities say very big, right? So that means if a city's 10 kilometers, right? It's 4.5 miles, 10 kilometers, whatever it is, then you can travel a length of 12 kilometers without violating Shabbos, right? Because it's going to take you that amount of time to get to outside of the city, right? So the reality is, if a person's in the city, right, or a person staying somewhere, or live somewhere, let's say, and they're in the city, and you say, "Wow, I only have 2,000 cubits. I only have 3,000 feet." Yeah, but we're talking about the entire city. So in general, if I'm within the city, that means the entire city I could technically walk. It wouldn't necessarily be forbidden, right? It does get more complicated, but for argument's sake, we'll just say that, for a Jew who wants to convert, you have to be within, I'd say, a couple miles walking distance to synagogue. Now, this doesn't have to do necessarily with the boundary. It has to do that, if it's too far away, you're not going to come to synagogue. And especially if it's a guy, he's got to pray 3 times a day, right? They got to live within walking distance, right? I think up until about 2 miles, 2.5 miles, maybe a little bit more, right, is within that boundary. If it's further out, it's much more problematic. Definitely much more problematic, because, again, how are you going to get to synagogue? You need to pray. Forget about getting there during the week. That's not a problem. You have a car, you have transportation, less of an issue, right? But if you have to pray, you have to get there. You have to be part of things, right? You have to be part of things over here. So if you have to be part of things, you have to be within walking distance, right? That's what I would say on that, but it's more complex. I just sort of broke it down a little bit. Somebody asks, can you buy matzah for Passover after it's really cheap? Yeah, you could do that. You could buy matzah, store it, right? You want to make sure it's stored in a place where it's not going to be too hot, right? It's really not too cold, and you could use it next year, right? You're going to make sure, if it's stored properly, obviously it shouldn't get stale, right? If it's totally boxed up, that shouldn't be a problem, right? And you just got to make sure also there are no bugs, right? Just got to, you'll shake it out before, just make sure there are no bugs inside, which there shouldn't be. But that you could do. That you could buy very cheap, right? That you could buy very cheap. And after Passover, that wouldn't be an issue, right? Certainly wouldn't be an issue. Yeah, any other questions? All right, let's get to verse 2, right? Unbelievable. We actually finished one verse, only took 9 weeks. Says the Torah. Book of Leviticus chapter 16, verse 2. Says, V'yomer Hashem el Moshe, Daber el Aaron, Achicho, al yavo b'kol eitz, el hakodesh, beis l'paroches, el pnei kapoires, shira Aaron, v'lo yamos kivanon ere al kapoires. Now, first verse told me that after God spoke to Moshe after the death of Aaron's 2 sons, they approached before Hashem and then they died. So now what's the second verse here tell me? Second verse here tells me God spoke to Moshe and said, speak to your brother. Now we're going to understand what happened. Because at the beginning, we spoke about this at length, maybe ad nauseum. We said, God spoke to Moshe after the death of Aaron's 2 sons. Very nice. What did he say? Don't know. Torah doesn't tell me. See, that's why you need oral law. That's exactly why you need oral law. Totally need oral law over here. You didn't have oral law, I never understand anything. Right? Totally never understand anything. So, what did God say over here? Gee, I don't know. Torah doesn't tell me anything. Okay. Torah doesn't tell me. We spoke about that, what's going on. And then we see the death of the two sons of Aaron. Then we see the death. But what happened? Again, Torah doesn't tell me till we get to this verse. Right? But the Torah already told me before. Book of Leviticus chapter 10. Right? Book of Leviticus chapter 10. See, if we have other information, then, either I understand a lot more, it's more confusing. So what does it say in chapter 10? Sons of Aaron, Nadav and Abihu, each took the fire pan, right? They each took a fire pan. They put fire in them, placed incense upon them. Upon it, they brought before Hashem an alien fire that God did not command. Verse 2, fire came forth from before Hashem consumed them. And they died. So why did they die? Chapter 10 tells me they died one very simple reason. They brought a strange fire. Problem is, later on it says, verse 8, chapter 10, verse 8, Shem spoke to Aaron saying, don't drink intoxicating wine, you and your sons with you, when you come to attend the meeting, that you not die. This is an eternal decree. Now I got two different reasons. Either it's because they brought a strange fire, or it's because they drank wine. Right? Seemingly they drank wine. Right? And wine intoxicates. Over here. So now the Torah tells me 6 chapters later, it tells me that they approached before Shem and they died. So what happened over here? What exactly happened? Did they die because they drew too close? Did they die because they brought a strange fire? Did they die because they drank wine? A lot of different reasons here. There are 3 other reasons Talmud gives. Okay, but the Torah doesn't tell me anything here. Right? That's exactly why you need oral law. Right? Torah doesn't tell me anything. What are the Karaites going to answer? Don't know. Probably have their own answer. Right? So, that, if God spoke to Moshe after the death of Aaron's 2 sons, good, what'd he say? I don't know, but they approached before Hashem and they died. Why? Comes along verse 2. Shem said to Moshe, speak to Aaron, your brother. We have to see why it says your brother. He may not come at all times in the sanctuary, within the curtain, in front of the cover that is upon the ark, and he will not die. For with a cloud I appear upon the ark cover. So what happened over here? What does the Torah tell me? Don't come at all times. When did the cloud cover the ark? The cloud covered the ark when? Cloud covered the ark when? When it was Yom Kippur. That's when the cloud covered the ark. That's exactly when the cloud covered the ark. So now again, what's going on? Are we saying that the 2 sons died because we said before, we mentioned this many times, it's because what happened on Yom Kippur? They went in on Yom Kippur when they went in, when it wasn't Yom Kippur. When is the high priest allowed to go into the Holy of Holies? Only in Yom Kippur. Over here, it seems, what's the punishment? Why did the 2 sons die? Seemingly because they went to the sanctuary when they weren't supposed to. That's what it sounds like. But you get a contradiction. Chapter 10, number of different reasons potentially why. Okay, so Or Chaim answered a lot of these questions. Other commentaries answered. Now, what does Rashi want here? Right? Let's see what the commentaries here say. First of all, it says below Yamus that he shall not die. Right? That he shouldn't come at all times in the sanctuary, within the curtain, i.e., by the Holy of Holies, in front of the covers upon the ark, and he will not die. Because if you do such a thing and it's not on Yom Kippur, what's the punishment? You will die. That's the punishment. Right? That's what's going to happen. So comes along Rashi. Rashi explains he's not going to die because if he comes in the Holy of Holies when he's not allowed to, he's going to die. Right? He's definitely going to die over here. And that's what the Medrash says. That's what the Medrash says over here. So what does that mean in the vernacular? It means you can't go into the Holy of Holies as a priest Even as a high priest, whenever you want. When's the only day you're allowed to go in to the Holy of Holies and have your incense, etc.? That's only on Yom Kippur. If you go in outside Yom Kippur, what's the punishment? Death. Death penalty. It says, for with a cloud I appear upon the ark cover. Okay, what's that a reference to? God says I always appear there. Right, with my pillar of cloud. Right? In other words, God's presence is always there. Right? It's always going to be there. It's always going to be in that area by the Holy of Holies. And because the revelation of my Shekhinah, i.e. my presence, is there, you shall take care, Rashi says, that he shall not come there regularly. Right? You shouldn't come there regularly. That's simple meaning. Right? Now, Rashi understands over here, it's talking about my pillar of cloud. That's how he's learning over here. We translated that with a cloud. Right? Now, Rashi over here says, with a, or we're translating here, with a cloud, not within. Not in a cloud. Because if you talk about in a cloud, then why say upon the ark cover? What, when the Torah says upon the ark cover, what would that mean? What would it refer to? It refer to the cloud itself. And what would the verse have said? It's one of the commentaries that Rashi says. It's upon the ark cover, not within. That's what it would have said, but didn't. So it means with a cloud, right? Right? Not in a cloud. Because in a cloud has different connotation. Different connotation. So now Rashi says over here, that he should not come to the Holy of Holies regularly. Now, if I were a Karaite over here, put on my funny Karaite hat over here. If I were a Karaite, what would I say? What would I say? Simple explanation is, simple reading of the text. Now, what's the reason that there's a death penalty here? For entering the Holy of Holies without permission. What would I think is the reason? Well, I think it's pretty clear. It says, because there's a cloud there. The cloud of God is there. Because the cloud of God is there, and you go in when you're not supposed to, i.e. when the cloud is there, what's the punishment? Death penalty. Now, what would happen if God were to appear without a cloud? God comes in a whoosh. Comes in a wind, no cloud. And let's say we're in the Holy of Holies then. There's no cloud over here, seemingly no problem. Right? There wouldn't be a death penalty over here. So Rashi says, what's the reason? What did Rashi say? Rashi says there was a revelation of my Shekhinah. It was a revelation of my presence. That it was the presence of God's Shekhinah which caused the death penalty. Meaning the presence, not the cloud. Right? That's not the reason. And then it says, which I appear upon. What does that mean? So that means that we're not talking about simple future here. It's an ongoing action, constant appearing, right? Similar to other places in the Torah where you use the same language of appearance over here. So Rashi says that simple explanation. That the fact that God's presence was there, not necessarily the cloud, but the fact that God's presence was there, that's why they're punished. That's why they get the death penalty. That's simple explanation. Our rabbis interpret, right, bring down the Medrash, or the Talmud says as well, you're not allowed to come into the sanctuary except with a cloud of incense, offering it on what day? On Yom Kippur. Right? So the Gemara says, you want to come into the sanctuary, you want to come into the Holy of Holies, when's the only time you're allowed to come in? When's the only time you're allowed to come in the Holy of Holies? It's only one time. One time a year. You come in with that incense. When? On Yom Kippur. You don't have to come whenever you want. Right? Right? That's the whole point. Right? Because you can't go see God's presence whenever you want. It's only on Yom Kippur. So now we understand, right? You're not allowed to come at any time to the sanctuary except, how would I understand the verse? Except when I appear with a cloud of smoke. Right? The cloud is not the pillar of clouds, again, which normally would accompany the presence of the Shekhinah, of God's presence, according to the first interpretation. But what does it mean? What does it mean over here? What it means, where's the smoke cloud coming from? It's coming from the incense. The incense is burned by the sanctuary, right? And who burns it was the high priest. Right? So explains Rashi over here. Right? In other words, first explanation is, why can't the high priest go there? High priest can't go there for one very simple reason. He can't go there because God's presence is there. The Shekhinah is there. That's simple explanation. Right? But the rabbis tell us different explanation. The only time he can go there is when? On Yom Kippur. Right? And that's why he's punished. That's why they're punished. Because they're not allowed to come whenever they want. All right, so explains Rashi over here. Now comes on Ibn Ezra. Ibn Ezra says, what does it mean coming in the cloud? It means you're only allowed to enter the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur with incense. Otherwise, if you don't enter with incense, you're toast. You'll die. Right? Another explanation, he says, that what does it mean in the cloud? Right? Or with the cloud, really. We didn't say in, right? As we explained before. That, what does God say over here? I dwell in the cloud on top over here. So what's the issue? Seemingly like Rashi said, that, at least the first explanation, the problem is you're seeing God's presence. Seeing God's presence, that's forbidden. Not only is it forbidden, death penalty. Right? Pretty severe. Comes along the Ramban. Comes along Nachmanides. First question that we asked, which we didn't answer, and that is, what does the Torah tell me? Torah says, God spoke to Moshe, speak to Aaron, your brother. Well, what other Aaron are we talking about? Aaron the butcher? Aaron the cook? Who are we talking about? Obviously, it's his brother. Why does it say your brother? Because, says the Ramban, because we got a warning over here. What's the warning? The warning is, since he's your brother, even though you're also included in this, Moshe is also a Levi. He also can't go in the Holy of Holies whenever he wants. Right? So too, since you can't go, your brother can't go either. So then he says over here, it brings down from the Ibn Ezra. It says, Ibn Ezra says that sons of Aaron came in with fire from the incense, right? They brought this incense. The Ramban disagrees. Ramban says no. Because what does the Torah tell me? What was the sin? Right? What was the sin? If we go further in the book of Numbers, chapter 3, verse 4, it says, what did they do? They brought a strange fire. Right? Let's just see the whole verse here. Right? Numbers chapter 3. Get there, I don't know when. Right? The next millennium. Numbers chapter 3, verse 4. Nothing of you died before Shem when they offered an alien fire before Shem in the wilderness of Sinai. They had no children, but Eleazar and Tamar ministered during the lifetime of Aaron, their father. So who took over for Nadav and Avihu? The other two brothers, right? Elazar and Itamar. Why they die? They died because they brought a strange fire, like the Torah said before, chapter 10. Right? They brought a strange fire. Now, if you want to tell me that this is the proof that they went in the Holy of Holies, and there's a warning that Moshe got, right? The warning that Moshe got is you got to tell over the fact they can't go in whenever they want. That Aaron, your brother, shouldn't go in whenever he wants. You too, not allowed to go in whenever you want, so you don't die. All the more so, I can understand what happened. It wasn't just a strange fire. We do understand it was a strange fire, the Torah tells me. Could be other reasons, right? It also could be all the more so, not only you're not allowed to come whenever you want, and this whole thing with the incense, what about being drunk? What about drinking before doing the service? What about all that? Right? What about all that? Are you allowed to serve? Are you allowed to serve when you drink? You're not allowed to, the Torah says. All the more so. Another warning that was given directly. Don't come in and serve me when you drink. Right? He has another question. The Ramban here says a very interesting thing. He says, how could you have thought? How could it have come into your minds to come into the place that your father didn't enter? Now, the view, the Medrash says, in some ways, Moshe thought, as the Or Chaim HaKadosh brought, that Moshe Rabbeinu thought they were greater than him in Aaron. But the question is, how could they have gone in the Holy of Holies when their father didn't go in? When there wasn't a command for the father to go in? They think they're greater than the father. They had an epiphany. And they said, it's such an auspicious time. Let me go into the Holy of Holies. Doesn't matter my father didn't go in. Doesn't matter my uncle didn't go in. We're going to go in. How could they have thought such a thing? Right? The reality is Aaron brought incense on the inner altar. But why did they go further in? Why did they think they could go further in? Right? And the Ramban says, I already answered that. I hinted at that. Right? If you go back to Leviticus chapter 10, verse 2. Right? That says they brought a strange fire. Right? What the Ramban there say? It brings down different reasons. They drew close. They brought a strange fire. And the question was it just the fire? Was the ketoris? Was the incense? On top of it, etc. So whatever he says, there's a hint over there. Take a look over there. But he says, but what does it say over here? What does it say over here? In the first verse, it says Bikravotzim, that they drew close. What's going on with that? He says they came to the altar to serve, but they came in front of God. What was the problem? We said before, as Rashi brought in, they went to see God face to face. What does the Torah tell me? The Torah says that God says you can't see, no one can see my face and live. That's what God said to Moshe Rabbeinu. So now they go in, God's presence is there, he's absent. He's absent. They die. So therefore, it's a warning to Aaron that you're only allowed to go where I tell you to go. That's it. You may have the greatest intention. You may, you could be thinking all these things according to Kabbalah, all these great things. Beautiful. There's only one problem. Right? And this is really the crux of the issue, which makes it almost impossible to understand. And that is, how could they have done something where God didn't command? First of all, they know they can't see God face to face. For whatever reason, they thought this is such an auspicious time, God's going to look the other way, so to speak. God's going to look the other way. And the Torah said no. The Torah says that's exactly why they died. You know why? Because you can't always get what you want. Can't always do what you want. It's not make believe. There are serious repercussions. And it cost them their lives. They didn't do it to show I can do it. You know, not to be like these ultra feminists, say I can do this and I can do that. I'm just as good as a man. And nothing to do with that. And nothing to do with that. They want to be so close to God. They had this epiphany. Great. They had a tremendous epiphany here. What's the problem? They did something they weren't commanded to do at their level. This is a hard thing to understand. You're talking, some of the greatest people ever created. And thinking that, okay, they weren't commanded. Why is God going to look the other way here? Yeah, very hard to understand. So says the Ramban further, and he says we saw it before, after the death of the sons of Aaron, previous verse, they drew too close. Right? They brought in front of God this ketoris, this incense. So he said they went too far. They went further than what Aaron did. Aaron went in the inner altar. This is further within. They went too far. And it cost them. Yeah, so explains the Ramban. So we have this original question. We answer it in different ways. Right? But this is a crux of the fact that we said in the first verse, they drew close when they weren't supposed to, when they weren't commanded. Right? And that cost them. Again, they did it for the right reason. They wanted to be so close to God. I get it. But he states clear over here, they went to a place they weren't commanded. That cost them. Right? And that cost them. So explains the Ramban. Comes on the Kli Yakar. I don't know if we'll get through the whole thing here. We'll see. Kli Yakar says, he has a similar question to the Ramban. It says, Daber Aaron Achicha. Speak to Aaron, your brother. Why does it mention brotherhood over here? In order to teach you that you shouldn't rely on your brotherhood with Moshe, that you shouldn't die when you come in to the Holy of Holies in merit of your brother. In other words, you may think, okay, my two sons died. My two sons died because they went in when they shouldn't have. But I'm his brother. We're also bloods, but I'm closer. So maybe I can rely on my brotherhood with Moshe. Nothing bad's going to happen if I go in. Maybe that's what he's going to think. Therefore, it says, even though your brother, is closer to God, don't rely on your brother over here. Don't rely on him for anything. In other words, or let's say before I go further, he said another explanation is, even though it's your brother, you can die like they died. Right? Your connection to your brother is not going to help. Now, let's think about this. Person has a pedigree. Let's say, certainly for the Jewish people, You don't have to go back too many generations where grandfather, great-grandfather, great-grandfather, not only was religious, but, was a rabbi or whatever. So we have tremendous pedigree. Nonetheless, what does a tremendous pedigree mean? What does having family members that went in the way of Torah mitzvahs were giants among giants, let's say? How does that help over here? So my Rebbe's mother, Rebbe Sternbach, would say, what is yichus? What does pedigree do? What does this pedigree do? So she would say, you know what the pedigree does? Pedigree makes you more obligated. Right? That's what it does. That's what it does. It makes you more obligated. So therefore, if you're very close to the king, you can get burnt. That's what it means. So if you have a super duper pedigree and you don't live to that standard, so what's the pedigree worth? It helps. Wouldn't we look different? If our parents were religious, our grandparents were religious, we had siblings, nieces, nephews, all going to the right path. Wouldn't we also be excelling going to the right path? So that would be an advantage. That would be a tremendous advantage. Is that a guarantee? It's not a guarantee. It's definitely not a guarantee. But you know what? If we have that in our genes, you got a better chance of being successful spiritually than if not. So you're going to say, so what happens to all these great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents, and all their great genes? What happens? Why do their kids, grandkids assimilate? Because the kids, they got to America, they got to other places, they don't want to suffer. They don't want to suffer. Judaism was like extra baggage that they didn't want. They throw their tefillin overboard. They want to have a connection to Judaism. Now, for many of them, it wasn't about questions they had about Judaism. It wasn't philosophical. Oh, what about this? What about, why do the righteous suffer? What about, suffering in general? What about, throw out whatever the block is. It's not about philosophy. For them, it was about survival. It was about survival. And their Judaism was baggage for that. So what they do, they get rid of it. They threw it overboard. They became successful. So what do they give their kids? They gave them something, some aspect of Judaism. A very watered down version. What do they give their kids? Even a more watered down version than what we have today. But it was very difficult to pass down. There were a lot of obstacles. Before the Holocaust, people were going off left and right. Why? Communism, socialism, democracy destroyed the Jewish people. It wasn't about, philosophical issues per se. Today, for sure, that's not the case. Today, it's all about design. Nobody cares about the truth today, most of the Jewish people. They can care less. Doesn't mean anything to them. It's not going to mean anything to them. Not going to mean anything to their kids. Right? So it's about desire. That's all it is. It's all about desire. But way back, people actually believed in certain things. But in their day, it was also the power of the street. What was the power of the street then? Again, communism, socialism, and Jews got caught up in all kinds of things. So here, Kliyakar, our first thing, he's warning Aaron that the Torah is warning Aaron and saying, yeah, you got a brother over here. You got a brother who's so great, maybe you can rely on him. Maybe through his merit it'll be okay. Says, no such thing. In other words, pedigree doesn't help over here. And you got the greatest pedigree. Your brother Moshe got to the 48th level of understanding. No one's reached that level. He almost reached the 49th level. So you can say, well, we're pretty close. He'll rub off on me. He'll be able to save me. No, they shouldn't think such a thing. Says the Kli Yakar further. There's another opinion. It says, even though he's your brother in prophecy, because what does it say by the giving of the Torah, Mount Sinai, chapter 19, verse 24 in the book of Exodus? It says, you and Aaron go up. Shows Aaron was also on the level. Also the level of prophecy. Nonetheless, what does it say? Moshe Rabbeinu can come in and speak to me whenever he wants. Right? It says in the book of Numbers, chapter 12, verse 7. My whole house is believed in him. Kind of interesting. That means whatever Moshe says goes. Who did God say is in front of? The entire nation. If God says it in front of the entire nation, doesn't it seem like you can't contradict what Moshe says? Can't contradict him. Right? Torah says the book of Deuteronomy, we'll get there, I don't know when. It says you can't add or subtract to the Torah. Very true. But if Moshe Rabbeinu is my beloved servant, can't go against him. Can't contradict him. So he says it's similar to someone who walks into the house of his master anytime he wants. Moshe Rabbeinu's got that ability. He can come in whenever he wants. He can speak to me whenever he wants. You can't. You're not at that level. Because how does Moshe Rabbeinu have the stamp of approval here? How is he the greatest of all prophets? He's the greatest of all prophets because of this verse. Because the Torah tells me clear, but go basing Nemanu in my entire house, Book of Numbers, chapter 12, verse 7. In my whole house, he's believed. He's the greatest of everybody. Whatever he says goes. Whatever he brings down in my name is good. Means you can't contradict him. You can't go against him. Aaron's also a prophet. True. Is Moshe greater? Yeah, he's greater. So that means Aaron cannot rely on Moshe because Moshe's greater. Moshe can speak to God whenever he wants. Can Aaron do that? No. Doesn't mean he's not a prophet. He's just not as great. But God, interesting enough, only religion out there. God gives a stamp of approval to a prophet in front of everybody, the entire nation. 3 million people. 3 million people. That's what he does. Right? He gives it in front of 3 million people. No one else can make such a claim. Nobody. Right? No other so-called religion makes such a claim. Not in front of 3 million people. Both the Christians and Muslims agree. They may say we're not chosen. They may say this. They may say that. So how they deal with this? Greatest of all prophets. Nothing changes. So he says, don't rely. God says to Aaron, don't rely on Moshe over here. Moshe, different. Prophecy, greater. He can speak to me whenever he wants. He's believed no matter what he says in my name, he's believed. Geez, interesting. Who did he say in front of? Didn't say in front of 3 people, did he? All this in front of the nation. And Moshe is giving over. Yeah, so says the Kli Yakar. Now, interesting. The Kli Yakar here says that Aaron also went up on the mountain. He didn't go as far as Moshe. Wasn't allowed to go as far as Moshe. So you see, Moshe's greater. See, the problem here is a person has great pedigree. Pedigree can make him more liable. Why can it make him more liable? It can make him more liable for one very simple reason. Because now look at his forefathers. Look who they are. How could he not want to reach that level? Right? How could he not reach that level? So if he doesn't reach that level, it makes him more obligated. Makes him more obligated because he's got a greater level of pedigree. So you can say it was a catch-22. In a certain way. I've heard some people say, you know what, pedigree is just add another zero. Because the reality is, even if you come from a great stock in spirituality, guess what? You have to claim your own. You're not going to just jump on the coattails of your forefathers, per se. You got to make your own path. You know, within parameters. You got to make your own path. So you got to work hard. You know, you can't just rely on that pedigree. Pedigree helps. Pedigree helps, no question. But the fact is, it's not everything. Right? Not going to take you to the promised land. You have to work for it. There's no free lunch over here. I mean, if I was free lunch, I don't have to do anything. All I have to do is believe in him. That would be very easy. That's called pass the buck. Okay. Right? It means my actions don't matter. Whatever I do doesn't matter. Right? Here it matters. Whatever I do matters. What I think matters. So there are ramifications. And we can't say, wow, I come from such a great pedigree. Well, guess what? God's going to look the other way because of my pedigree. Who says? That's exactly what he's saying, not that way. Right? He's saying, you got to be careful. Even more careful. You got Moshe Rabbeinu in your corner. You got Moshe Rabbeinu in your pockets. So what? You're still going to get warned more because you're not Moshe Rabbeinu. Right? My whole house is not believed through you. That's not what the Torah doesn't say that. It says through Moshe Rabbeinu. So you can't rely on those laws. There's no possible way. It helps. Having a pedigree helps. It's not everything. Right? It can be used against you also. You know, because God can say after 120 years, whatever level a person reached, let's say it's very low level of that, going to look at your forefathers. Well, what happened to you? You had the same pedigree, same blood. You could have also reached high spiritual levels, just like them. You didn't. Like you say, if any level person reaches, if they don't reach that high level, then they're in trouble. That could be, but that's not the point here. Right? The point is who we comparing ourselves to. Right? And we always say, God's not going to ask you why I weren't like this one, like that one. He's going to say, why didn't you reach your own potential? That's what he's going to say. But see, in the bigger scheme of things, as we mentioned earlier, if a person had a pedigree, and a person had people around him, aunts, cousins, relatives, all kinds of relatives that are going in the right path, you'd also go in the right path through osmosis. Does that mean you're going to stay in the right path? No, there's no guarantee. Right? I'm not going to say there's a guarantee, but I think that would help quite a bit when everyone's going in that right path. It's strength in numbers. Now, is it a full-fledged guarantee? Certainly not. Not a guarantee. We have to acquire our own Torah. Pedigree, having family around, all doing the same thing, that certainly helps. I don't think there's any question. Is it a guarantee? That's how you're going to end up? No, no guarantee. No guarantee. So here, Kliyakar says, do not think you are going to rely on your brother. Don't think you're going to rely on the pedigree. He's different. He's radically different than you. You're still a prophet, still at a very high level. That no one disagrees. But you're not on the level. You're not Moshe Rabbeinu. You're not at that level. Because Moshe Rabbeinu is believed in my whole house. No one else has that status. Right? No one else has that status. Who else has such a status? Nobody. Because God said in front of the world, in front of millions. No one else has that claim. Nobody. Right? That's the case. That's exactly what the Torah here says. Numbers chapter 12, verse 7. Just like a person go to his master whenever he wants, Moshe Rabbeinu went to his master whenever he wanted. What about Aaron? Didn't say about Aaron. Aaron not on that level. Right? Totally not on that level. Right? Everyone else, not on his level. Pretty clear, not on his level. But you might have thought, I'm going to rely on Moshe. I'm going to rely on his laurels and his level. No. You're also a prophet, true. But he says, but you got an extra warning. That's the whole point over here. You got an extra warning. Don't do this like they died. Right? You can't just go in whenever you want. You can't just do what you want. Because otherwise, you pay a price. And you pay a very serious price. That's why you have the extra warning. Right? Speak to Aaron, saying, don't go in whenever you want, so that you should not die. So it's a pretty severe warning here. But he's not going to compare to his brother. That's clear. So a person may say, well, better to have no pedigree. Then the only place I can go is up. Okay. All right, but at the end of the day, let's be clear. Person's going to get judged after 20 years, not based on who their pedigree was, not based on who their forefathers were. They're going to get judged for who they were, for what the source of their soul was, what they were here to fix up, what they were supposed to do. And we may get seriously embarrassed by what we've done in this world. We may get seriously embarrassed after 120 years. But see, we make the bed we lie in. We have no one to blame except ourselves. And even if we went down a slippery slope without repentance, thinking we're doing the right thing, getting carried away and all kinds of other things, you're going to have to answer. God's going to say, I didn't want you to do that. I put things there. I put, stumbling blocks. People can make mistakes. People can make tremendous mistakes. They can certainly do that. But you're going to have to answer for them. 100% you're going to have to answer for them. There's no free lunch over here. You're going to get judged. Did you learn Torah? Were you honest in business? Right? Whichever one comes first. So we're going to have to answer. It's not about, what your ancestor did, what this one did, the other one did. It's about what you did. And therefore, the judgment's going to be according to, did you pass these tests? You failed these tests. Where were you holding? What were you doing? At the time. And we get no one to blame but ourselves. And that's part of the embarrassment of what hell is. Because now we understand what absolute truth is. And it's embarrassing. Totally embarrassing. Why this happened? You got no one to blame but yourself. It's a scary proposition. I would say rather be embarrassed today, yesterday, tomorrow, day after, than be embarrassed later. I mean, we're going to be embarrassed at some level. But to save from that embarrassment, we don't want to have everything revealed to us and say, listen, look what you did over here. Look what you didn't accomplish. Look what you could have done. Let's see what your potential was. Because there are two things. Person's going to get judged after 120 years. You're going to see one movie, what you did in this world. Second movie is what you could have done, what your potential was. That's part of what hell is. The embarrassment, what you could have done, who you could have been. That embarrassment can last for forever. Unless the person repented before. If not, you can imagine. Just imagine, a person got caught doing something and they're totally embarrassed. They got their hand caught in the cookie jar, whatever, got caught doing something. Now they're totally embarrassed. They could justify this, that, but they're totally embarrassed. Now imagine something like that in a world of absolute truth, multiply that embarrassment by infinity. Can't imagine what that is. Can't imagine. Anyone's ever had an out-of-body experience, they all say the same thing, Jew or non-Jew. They saw this great light. They saw the soul hover above the body. They see the light flash before their eyes, every last thing that they did. All their thoughts, all their actions in a split second. Who's not going to be embarrassed? Better get the embarrassment now and the suffering now than later. Get out of the way now. Because later it's going to be a lot worse. A lot worse. Knowing we didn't reach potential, knowing we wasted time, knowing, all kinds of things. And then we have to see what we did. It's bad enough if a person did it. Maybe he didn't have remorse, he didn't have enough remorse, whatever. And now you see it and now you understand the absolute truth. You are totally embarrassed. You're exposed. Who wants to be exposed? Nobody. Nobody wants to be exposed. For things they did and whatever. Nobody wants to be exposed like that. Oh, now you got exposed. There's nowhere to hide. There's nowhere to hide over there. You're going to have to sit there and just, I don't even know how to say it in spiritual terms. You have to sit there and grin and bear it. That's all you can do. That suffering is like, it's like taking a needle and pricking the body. That's what it's like. That's what the embarrassment feels like. It's like you're being ripped to shreds. There ain't nothing you can do except admit I did this and that God should have mercy. Because if not, we're in serious trouble. In general. We say every morning, in our preliminary prayers, that God shouldn't, we shouldn't have any trials, tribulations. Should be brought to trials and tribulations. On the other hand, we don't grow without them. So we got to put our best foot forward no matter what. We have to, rise to the occasion, so to speak. Even if it's difficult. Because you don't want to, you don't want to be more embarrassed later. If someone's ever got caught and been exposed, probably all of us, in different ways. The person got caught doing something they shouldn't have done. And there's no justification. Let's make it easy. There's no justification whatsoever for what they did. All you want to do is hide. Go under the bed and hide. That's what you want to do. You don't want to have to take responsibility over you. And admit responsibility and all that. If you're talking about that in the physical world, imagine what that can be in the spiritual world. Can't imagine. We can't imagine. But again, everyone who has an out-of-body experience tells the same thing. They understand now what absolute truth is. They see clear. They're already embarrassed by things they've done and what they've seen. Many admit the same thing. Exactly what the Zohar says. Exactly what Kabbalah says. Like my everybody say, okay, I've never met anyone who's been in that world and come back. But, Jews and non-Jews tell the same story. So imagine the embarrassment we have in this world and multiply it by infinity. We don't want that. But guess what? There is somewhat of a silver lining. What's the silver lining? The silver lining is that embarrassment is also part of atonement. Is it going to fully atone? No. But it's partial atonement here. So that's good. So I would say the more embarrassed we get in this world, more atonement we get, less atonement we need in the next world. The point is, we've spoken about this many times, is that we don't want to rest on our laurels. We don't want to rest on, our ancestors or whatever. Let's take responsibility for ourselves, and that's hard enough. It's hard enough in this world. But see, we have to take a self-account. We have to think about what I done today, what I did yesterday. Tomorrow, I have to take into account. Gonna have to answer. Not gonna be easy. But rather we get it now than get it later. But nobody wants it now either. Catch-22. Yeah. So I'll take any questions. I'm gonna stop there because the next part is kind of long. We'll deal with it next week. See how far we get. Any questions? Any questions on any of that? All right, so no other questions. I'm going to sign out. This is every Sunday, 9:00 Eastern time, 4:00 Israel time. Anyone has any questions? Find me on Facebook at Michael Chaim Kaufman or Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism. Send me an email, rabbichaimkaufman@gmail.com, RABBICHAIMCOFFMAN@gmail.com.